welcome all of you to our open session of the Tahoe Forest Hospital Board of Directors. This is our August 25th meeting, and I would like to have our counsel read us out of closed session.
Thank you, Chair Wong. The board considered 7 items in closed session this evening. The first 5 is 5.1 to 5.3. There's no reportable action other than approval of acceptance of those reports. Item 5.4 was approved on a 5-0 vote. That was a closed session minutes. There was no reportable action on 5.5 or 5.6. 5.7 has been continued and will be considered by the board at the end of the open session under item 20. And so that one was not considered. And item 5.8 was approved. The medical staff credentialing recommended decisions were approved on a 5-0 vote. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. And then are there any deletions or corrections to our posted agenda? I do want to tell you that we did pull 16.3, the legislative reform discussion, because that bill is dead in committee. So that is eliminated from our agenda. Is there any other deletions or corrections?
I would like to pull the financial report from the agenda.
Okay.
Dale?
And usually, Dale, we do that at the time of the presentation of that item.
That's fine.
So we'll do it then. Thank you so much, though.
Chair Wong, the only other item was we're moving 5.7 to item 20. It will be considered as item 20.
20. All right. Okay. So then we're going to move on to item 10, which is input from our audience. And I want to just give you a couple of guidelines on doing that, is that you can address the board on any item that is not on the agenda. If you would like to speak to any item on the agenda, then if you'll wait until we get to that item, it will be much more appropriate. If you want to give public comment with the Zoom, what I'd like to have you do is either raise your hand or use the icon on the Zoom screen to raise your hand and keep it on. And then as I see you, I will allow you to speak. You have 3 minutes to speak, and you can say a lot in 3 minutes, but 3 minutes so that we can get everybody in that would like to do that. And if it goes beyond that, I do apologize that I will have to have you wrap it up. If you wanted to do anything written-wise, comments, that can always be done prior to the meeting, at least 24 hours, so that the clerk has the ability to get it distributed to the board. So at this time, is there any audience input that is not on the agenda? You can push the button for raising your hand, or you can just raise it and I'll see you. Okay, so nothing at this time for input from the audience. Then I'll move on to input from our Employees Association, and the same guidelines apply to that input. Okay, seeing nobody raising their hand from the Employees Association, then I will go to our next item on our agenda, which is acknowledgements for second quarter 2022 value recognition. And I have the great honor to be able to tell you who those recipients are. We have 5 values that we not only want to talk, but also walk. And our acronym for our values is QUEST: Quality, Understanding, Excellence, Stewardship, and Teamwork. So under our first value, quality, holding ourselves to be the highest standard, committed to continuous improvement, and having personal integrity in all we do. And our quality award goes to Jennifer Trudell from the Business Intel Analyst, and she is out of the Information Technology Department. So congratulations to Jen. Our next value is understanding, being aware of the concerns of others, demonstrating compassion, respecting and caring for each other as we interact. And our award goes to Santiago Espinoza Ayala from Patient Access, and he is a representative in patient registration. Our next award is for excellence, doing things right the first time, every time, and being accountable and responsible. And that one goes to Andrea Garcia, who is a medical assistant in our multi-specialty clinics on the second floor of our cancer center. Our next value award goes stewardship, being a community partner responsible for safeguarding care and managing of health systems resources while being innovative and providing quality health care. And the stewardship award goes to Svetlana Shop, who is our infection preventist, and she works in the infection prevention department. Teamwork. Looking out for those we work with, finding ways to support each other in the jobs we do. And that award goes to Megan Anderson, who is the denial refund specialist in patient financial services. We also want to award to our leadership, who are our role models in these values. And for our manager, Jenny Parvin, manager of the ICU, is been selected. And then our physician is Dr. Michelle Kim, family practice at Incline Village Medical Group and Health Clinic. So please give a big hand to all these award winners who make this place the great place to work. Our next item on the agenda is a medical executive committee meeting consent agenda, and that's Dr. Lane.
Thank you. And silent clapping is rather underwhelming. So it goes. So we had only two privilege approvals with changes. So the first one was in the NPPA privilege form. This was very minor. It was more wording changes so that everything was more uniform through each privilege category. They also added NRP, which is the neonatal resuscitation certification is added for pediatric NPs and PAs. And then it used to be 5% of charts per month needed to be audited. Now, California's had a change in law that says at least one chart per month, but the way it actually works is each NP or PA, whoever's their supervising physician comes up with how many or additional charts they want reviewed. So sometimes it's ones they need to consult on or complications or difficult charts. So we updated this to reflect what the current California law is. On the second one, which is, they're calling it MNT, and it might actually be MST, I'm not sure. It's a malnutrition screening tool. And this more delineates, so every patient who comes in the hospital is going to get a nutrition screening by nurses within the first 24 hours. Any of those patients that look to be at risk for malnutrition, as identified initially by nursing staff, will receive a visit from a dietitian and a plan from there. So it just goes through and makes clear what our malnutrition screening plan is. And these were just minor, these were changes to them, but relatively minor changes. Any questions on these?
Any questions from our board? The only comment that I would make, and it's just it's not really a vocabulary, but when they're using abbreviations, could they please identify what that abbreviation is the first time it's used? I noticed in the MNTs, they were skipping around. So again, it's just an editorial comment. Are there any comments or questions from our audience? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to accept the Medical Executive Committee consent calendar?
Director Barnett, I'll move to approve the Medical Executive Committee consent agenda as presented.
And could I have a second, please?
This is Mary. I'll second it.
I'm sorry, who seconded it, please?
Mary.
I'll second it.
Okay. So it was moved by Director Barnett, seconded by Director Brown, that we accept the Medical Executive Committee consent calendar. A roll call vote.
Director Barnett?
Yes.
Director Shamblin?
Yes.
Director Shamblin? Okay. Director McGarry?
Yes.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Wong?
Yes. So the consent calendar is approved, Dr. Lane. Thank you so much for your report. Then we go on to 14, consent calendar. And this, Director Shamblin, is where you want to say something.
Yes, I'd like to pull the financial report for questions.
Okay, so 14.2.1 is going to be pulled. Any other ones that's the board or staff want to pull? Okay. Again, these are usually reports, informational material, nothing of controversy. So could I have a motion to accept the consent calendar except for 14.2.1?
And there's no public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any public comments on the calendar? Okay, then we'll go back to the motion. Can I have a motion to accept the calendar as presented except for 14.2.1?
I'll move approval. Dale?
A second, please.
I'll second, Michael.
That it's moved by Director Shamblin, second by Director McGarry, that we approve the consent calendar without 14.2 or without 14.2.1, the financial report. Could we have a roll call?
Director Barnett?
Oh, approved?
Director Shamblin?
Yes.
Director McGarry?
Yes.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Wong?
Yes. So we will be moving that the financial report down to 17, item 17. Our next item, 15.1, is a split dollar program. And I think our CEO, Henry Weiss, will start it off, and then Alex McLennan and Trevor Layton will talk about it.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Tall Forest Health System continues to look to develop pay or benefit or other programs that will continue to move us forward for our team, to honor our team. This program is really focused on our medical staff, and it's available to leaders of our organization. And there are, as far as we know, there are no other health systems within 50 to 100 miles that offer this tried and proven program that's been around for corporations for a very long time. But it will allow medical staff and leaders to choose carefully over a period of time to really have a nice enhancement during their retirement years. And so I'd like to turn it over to Alex and then our outside specialist who will share this with you for your review, discussion, consideration tonight.
Thank you, Harry. Alex McLennan, Chief Human Resources Officer. And we started to look at these programs and try to design some back in 2020. We put a pause on it during the pandemic. And then we reached out to Executive Benefits Solutions to help us reignite that flame. And, we knew that this is something that was really important for us, for our medical staff and leadership, so that they can try to save more dollars, as some of the highly compensated don't get the same type of benefits as our frontline staff do when it comes to retirement. And so we engaged with EBS to do that, and we've been working with Trevor and a colleague of his, Dawn, for some time now. As we've moved through this, it's probably been 12 months or more. And we're finally at the place now where we feel we can bring you something to approve to move forward with making this benefit available to our medical staff and our leadership. Probably in January would be the timeline to turn that on. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Trevor so that he can really walk us through the program.
Hi, everybody. My name is Trevor Lattin with Executive Benefit Solutions. Thank you so much for having me on the call today. Alex and Harry, thank you as well for going through and working with us on putting together this plan. Board members, you should have received ahead of the call today both an executive summary and a detailed report that we built and put together to highlight not only the plan design, but also the financial impact that this proposed plan would have for Tahoe. Do I have the ability, by the way, to share a screen? Is that possible in the large group setting?
Yes, you do.
Okay, terrific. Oh. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. So specifically, I wanted to focus on this executive summary document. One, because the board members would have already received this, and also because the 33 pages can go ad nauseum into the details of this plan. I'd also like to throw out that I and my colleagues are more than happy to have a one-off discussion with anybody who would like to do a deeper dive or have specific questions that might go outside of the time allotted for me today. So as Harry and Alex set up, this is a key employee voluntary retirement plan. It's unique in that a hospital district like Tahoe Forest generally has to follow the rules of tax exempts and not-for-profit organizations when it comes to key employee benefit plans. Now, you'd sit there and say, well, what's really the big deal about that? Well, it really does limit what we can bring to the table to offer to be able to attract and retain your key people, in this case, the medical staff. The reason being is there's lots of tax rules and other formalities that we have to deal with. Public companies have a set of rules, private companies have a set of rules, and not-for-profits have a set of rules. Being that Tahoe does not have the same, let's say, plethora of things to be able to throw at someone to attract and retain them, such as equity, stock rewards, large bonuses, company ownership, and so forth. And we have to come back to what's called IRC, Internal Revenue Code Section 457F, and really follow those guidelines on what we can come together with. So that was, of course, all factored in. And the initial plan design specs that we worked with the executive team to put together are eligible employees will be primarily physicians, but also can include department directors and executives. The goal of the plan is to allow those key employees an opportunity to build supplemental retirement income for the future on a tax-favored basis. It's a voluntary plan. So part of the implementation effort will be EBS providing one-on-one consultations with the eligible participants to see if they'd like to participate and to what extent they'd like to participate in the plan. Tahoe is looking for something that's competitive as well as at a reasonable cost for the organization. And EBS was able to, come together with the plan design as follows. There will be two separate components. The employee will have the ability to voluntarily reduce his or her current salary for a period of 5 years. Now, don't worry, they're reducing it with a purpose. Those dollars are going to go into really this retirement plan. The employee in Tahoe Forest will save taxes as if it would have paid on this compensation. Because this is basically not being taken today, there are less payroll taxes and income taxes being paid today. These are being deferred to a future time. The employee in Tahoe Forest will enter into what's called a loan regime split dollar life insurance arrangement with annual premium payments that are equal to the amount of the salary reduction that the employee chooses. Now, I'd like to pause. In the executive benefits industry, we are obviously terrible marketers, and who would ever come up with something and call it a loan regime split dollar plan? That sounds absolutely awful, and I completely agree with you. However, it speaks very well to what this plan is. A life insurance structure allows for a lot of tax benefits. And if we put a loan on it, what happens is essentially the premiums that are being paid into this plan for cash value that can be drawn by the participant at a later date in retirement. Those premiums are basically being loaned to the participant. So what ends up happening is the financial impact to Tahoe ends up being minimal, because as opposed to giving money to the participant, they're basically loaning them money that will then be paid back with the death benefit and the life insurance policy at some point in the future. Now, split dollar plans have been around for decades. And quite simply, it's an agreement between two parties, in this case, Tahoe Forest and the employee, on how to split the ownership, death benefit, and cash value of a life insurance contract. Now, these life insurance contracts are different than the ones that each one of us would look at for estate planning purposes, like a term policy. These are specifically structured for loan regime split dollar plans. They're institutionally priced. And the whole point of the life insurance policy is to accumulate cash and allow those dollars to be able to grow on a very tax advantaged basis. So in the case here for Tahoe Forest, the policy would be owned by the employee with the premium payments paid for by Tahoe Forest. Those premium payments, as I said earlier, are treated as a loan to the employee, which is collateralized by the cash value and death benefit in the policy. Now, as a way to offer a little bit more of a compelling reason to participate, Tahoe Forest will offer a 15% match on the first $50,000 of premiums or salary reduction put into the plan. Now, that does not cost Tahoe anymore because that match would be part of the loan to the participant. But it's a way to, let's say, make this plan more compelling for the participant and make them really stop and think about why would they ever want to leave Tahoe Forest by having this terrific plan in place and provide some glue in the seat. So as I mentioned, split dollar life insurance arrangements have been used by tax exempt and nonprofits for many years, really as a way to be an alternative to the limited plan design options that are available, back to my earlier point. So let's talk about what the plan impact is for the key employees. Well, if the participants are taking a salary reduction today and putting those dollars instead into the split dollar plan, they're saving taxes on their current income because of the reduction of salary. Less salary is going to be less income taxes. The dollars that are put into that policy grow on a tax-deferred basis, and when those dollars are accessed by the employee down the road, most likely in retirement, they can be non-taxable to the employee if properly structured. In other words, if they're taken out over a period of time that the employee decides, those dollars will essentially be tax-free, which is extremely compelling in today's unknown tax regime and markets out there. In addition to having that cash value that can be invested across a variety of market S&P 500 type accounts, the participant will have the supplemental life insurance death benefit coverage of that plan. So what's the impact for Tahoe Forest? Well, right out of the gate, Tahoe Forest will save payroll taxes because there's a lower salary being paid to the employee. There will be annual cash flow impact for the company match up to that cap of 15% to the first $50,000. But that amount, of course, will be recovered in the future when the loan is repaid, most likely at the death of the participant. But the participant can always pay off the loan sooner if they so choose. And that basically comes back to the original plan impact for both the key employees and for Tahoe Forest. I do have specific slides from the presentation that I'm happy to go through and highlight. I also want to make sure I have plenty of time provided for any questions that you might have about this specific plan. So before I go and flip over to some PowerPoint slides, noting that I'm about 10 minutes in, does anybody have any specific questions that I can answer?
How are you compensated for your work to set this up?
Excellent question. Within the life insurance policies, there is cash value and there is asset under management fees that are built in by the life insurance carrier that pays a firm like myself over the period of time that the life insurance policy is in place. When clients ask us, we are more than happy to share what that compensation is. It ends up being really no different than the dollars that your mutual fund lineup within your investment portfolio are paying to portfolio managers. It's a very similar compensation structure that the life insurance industry uses for these policies. So these are not, so the one thing I would like to say, if your question is going this direction, are we paid commission that's equal to the first year premium like a lot of life insurance policies? And the answer is, I wish. We are paid on an assets under management basis, and it's a far different schedule and far more reasonable and more lines up with how mutual funds are paid than a typical retail life insurance policy. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
So it does come out of the assets of the policy the individual puts in, as opposed to a bill that the hospital might get for setting this up.
A great question, Mr. Chamblin, and I would say correct. The answer that when you kind of look at what a ledger on the detailed flow of dollars within a life insurance policy, which of course every participant will be provided with and can analyze, and happy to kick the tires around with us on. It'll go through and show the costs of insurance, the mortality costs, where every penny basically goes over the life of that policy is detailed out, for decades, until a actuarial age of death. Within that, we can then basically say, here is the cost of insurance, here's what pays for commissions, here's what pays for portfolio management, et cetera. And within that, it basically, the way that we really describe it, because this is what ends up happening, is if there's a market return of, say, 6.75% in an S&P 500 index, well, the policy is going to pay, perhaps 6.5 or 6.6%, because those costs are basically coming out of that return. Yeah. But again, that's detailed out in the ledger that we would be providing during the underwriting process to each particular participant, and they can then feel very comfortable making or not making a decision based on that.
Thank you.
Director Barnett, what is the percent that you charge for fees? And mutual funds go anywhere from 1% to 3% of the invested assets. What would the insurance company charge?
It's going to be quite similar to that, Mr. Barnett. And it really depends on the product and the carrier. So part of our process when we went through and ran this is we identified that Johnny Hancock was a carrier with high ratings and what we felt were very compelling fee structures. So we basically used that for our illustration, which is in the detailed recommendation report as an example that worked for the particular age and gender of the employee that we use as a model. Now, I would say that when you get into when we get into moving forward, we're going to go back to the marketplace, look at carriers and products, and identify what the carrier rating looks like, what the fee structure is, and ensure that we're bringing something as compelling as possible to the participant. But the mutual fund schedule that you just rattled off, it's quite similar to what the insurance industry pays. There is one slight difference. Sometimes the cost of insurance based on the age of the participant will get into that fee structure a little bit because it's more expensive to insure, say, a 60-year-old than it is a 30-year-old. So there's some nuances in there to how that basically gets allocated based on the age and gender and health of the individual that's being insured. But again, we're more than happy to be able to show that and detail that out as far as someone wants to take it, to make sure they feel like it's appropriate for their particular situation.
I have another question, which is, in your illustrations, you use the age 43 as the first year for deferred payments, and in your example, you use $100,000 for 5 years. But it seems to me that the age of the person would have a big impact. It would be because of the time value of money.
Exactly right.
Better used for younger people. On the other hand, the people who are doing this are the physicians and the executives. Generally speaking, they're going to be the older people in the organization. So how does that work out?
Yeah, I'll answer one question, which I think is part of your question, which is why do we choose a 43-year-old? When we looked at the census, that fell right in the middle, and we felt like that was a good place to use just as an example. But you have a very good point. I would tell you that if someone is...
It's not like that. It's just like take care of shit. It just is weird.
Oh, is that someone? Oh, someone needs to be muted. But I would say that clearly someone who is 30 years old, 40 years old, or 50 years old is going to have much better cash accumulation because they're going to have more time for that to accumulate to, say, a retirement age of 60 or 65 versus a 55, 60, 65-year-old who just doesn't have that runway for those dollars to accumulate, plus the fact that someone who's on the older side actuarially is going to be more expensive to insure. So we use 43 because that particular hypothetical just seemed to be right in the middle and is right in the sweet spot. Clearly, someone who is going to be age 60, I would probably say, are you planning on working at least 10 years? And let's really make sure this makes sense and that there's going to be a good amount of cash accumulated for your particular situation with the match before going forward. So age does make a difference. And that's the thing that we always have to make sure that we can factor in when we're talking to someone on an individual basis to see if it makes sense for them.
I have another question for you. How does this benefit compare to a 401k? Because there is an existing 401k plan for the hospital.
So I'll speak broadly speaking, and then maybe Alex can jump in on some things specific to the 401k. A 401k plan is what's considered a qualified plan. It has to be offered to all employees and has some limitations. One, it has limitations on how much can be contributed on an annual basis, typically $19,500 per year on a pre-tax basis, and has limitations on when those dollars can be accessed by the participant. It's really within a box, subject to what's called ERISA, and really has to be well monitored in a trust-like format. A non-qualified plan, which a loan regime split dollar would fall into, a lot of those limitations of the 401k plan go away. One, it can be discriminatory. It can be discriminatory towards the type of employee that can participate, typically those that are highly compensated and have the sophistication to be able to participate. So you cannot offer a non-qualified plan to all employees. Second, there are no limitations on how many dollars can go into the plan on an annual basis. It can be technically in a non-qualified plan, one can put their entire salary into it, not in this plan design on the table here at Tahoe Forest, but from a non-qualified standpoint, that is possible. Also, there are no limitations on when the dollars can be accessed. So while this is meant to be a retirement plan, because that's what most folks are saving for, and that's really the optics that Tahoe Forest wanted to bring as a retirement type tool, technically, the participant can access the dollars within the policy at any time. They can pull cash out at any time. So this is meant to be in addition and above the 401k as an additional attraction and retention tool that's unique and differentiated from other employers in the marketplace.
So I have a question on that. If you pull the money out early, do you lose money by doing that, or are there restrictions on it? Because this whole scheme is based on the time value of money and also what the existing interest rates and rates of return are.
So exactly right. So do you lose money? Well, there's no penalties. There's no 10% hit. The only thing it would lose, of course, is if one wants to take the money out before a forecasted retirement age, that's obviously less dollars accumulating, right? But you're right, it is based on time value of money. That's what really drives, any sort of insurance product, and also ensuring that those dollars are invested in, what's considered a conservative, S&P 500 index or other similar sort of, market rate to ensure that dollars are accumulated. Now, the dollars are also accumulating on a tax-deferred basis. So, one does not pay taxes on that upside of the dollars sitting in the plan until they actually access the dollars and take a distribution. And because life insurance policies, when you take dollars out, that is considered a return of premium, those dollars are tax-free. So in a sense, you could say that taxes were never paid on these dollars that are being reduced in salary by the participant and put into the plan and then taken out on a tax-free basis at a retirement age. So the time value of money component is very, very important. But the other thing that we can't lose sight of is the life insurance industry has a very well-funded lobby. And they've ensured that life insurance contracts have a lot of tax advantages to the policyholder. And that's one of the things that we're taking advantage of here.
Well, isn't it true that over time, it's possible that the legislature could change some of those tax advantages? They've changed capital gains over time, and they've changed a lot
Certainly could. You're right. And all of a sudden, life insurance death benefits that have been tax-free since the beginning of time could all of a sudden be taxable. You are right. There is risk there. Prior to 2 years ago, my thought would have been typically these things have some grandfathering components, again, because of a very well-funded life insurance lobby. But 2 years later today, things are a little weird out there, and you never really know what might happen from a tax regime standpoint. So you have a good point. There is risk that tax law could change, and all of a sudden life insurance no longer has tax advantages. I would say there's a lot of interesting things that will happen to all of us that have life insurance on our lives if that's the case, but it's always possible. The lobby stays very close to this, and our policy people stay very close to it. We don't see anything being hinted, but as you know, Mr. Barnett, can't really speak to the vagaries of politicians and tax code. So I think that's probably my safest answer.
How much control does the participant have over the investment vehicles?
There is an investment lineup. I would say the investment lineup within the policy typically looks like quite similar to a 401k investment lineup. Typically index-based funds based on an S&P 500 or a global sort of index. So I would say there's typically about 8 to 10 different investment portfolio choices. Participants can put their money in all or spread out across the buckets. Frankly, we find these days more than ever, people typically will go into an S&P 500 index choice, feeling that they're at least tracking to the market. And that seems to be the most popular option across those offered within any carrier's product.
Does the insurance company guarantee a certain rate of return, or is it just the market rate of return that's produced by the particular investment selected by the individual for his portfolio in this plan?
It's a great question. The answer is a little bit of both. So depending on the carrier and product, sometimes there's a guaranteed crediting rate or rate of return. And then there's also going to be a market rate based on an index such as the S&P 500. I'm always very, very careful to offer anything that's guaranteed because I think the only thing guaranteed is death and taxes, of course. But within each product set, there's typically something that offers a quote guaranteed return from the carrier that people can feel comfortable with. Frankly, we look at these days as saying, if you look back over the last 40 years, we like to encourage our participants to look at the investment lineup to try to look at it about a 6% market return. We've found that to be very conservative and something that over 40 years, the policies, the investment portfolios are typically returning. We feel like that's conservative, and that's the target that we always try to look for when coming up with the right product and carrier for a client.
When the person decides to retire or decides to take the money out, if they take it out, let's say earlier than retirement, or they take it out because they need cash, I don't know, they want to buy a house or whatever, they want to put their grandkids through college, then would they get the same benefit as if it accrued later, or does that no longer qualify for tax protection?
From a tax perspective, nothing changes. What does change is the amount of cash, obviously, that would be accumulated in the policy. What we would counsel that participant, if they anticipate wanting to take cash out before retirement, what we would counsel is to say, let's understand what your plan is. What dollars would you like to take out when, and then let's get that into an illustration and see what that looks like. So it would not affect any of the tax advantages of the policy necessarily, but it would affect, of course, what the long-term dollars accumulated would be. So by counseling and understanding what those goals are, which is what we do with every individual one-on-one discussion with a potential participant, is we can actually build that in. We have a very large concierge physician client. 500 docs are in the plan, and a handful of them have used a similar plan for college savings, where they said, I have other things for retirement put aside. I would like to use this for college savings. We've said, gosh, you realize that life insurance really operates well with a very long-term view. Let's understand what your college savings are for your kids. About half of them, and it ended up making sense because they had plenty of accumulation time and they wanted to put dollars away for 10 years, pull dollars out over 4 years, and then keep putting dollars in until the next child went to college. In a couple of these cases, they were just too close. There wasn't enough accumulation time, so we advised against using it for that. But back to your question, Mr. Barnett, it could be used for more short-term savings goals. Just depends on the situation and how much accumulation time, back to your point, time value of money, and how that can be best be leveraged, within the accumulation component of the policy.
Do any of our other board members have any questions for Trevor?
I do, Alice. Alice, this is Mary.
Yes.
Okay, my questions are not probably as sophisticated as Director Barnett's, but my question has to do with the portability of this plan. So as I understand it, Tahoe Forest will advance the premiums for a period up to 5 years. And how portable is this plan? Excuse me, let me back up. And then it's anticipated that those monies will be repaid probably out of the death benefit of the employee. What happens to the employee who leaves after 10 years? When do those loans come due, and how much of this can they take with them?
That's a terrific question. So the first question, how portable is it? The policy will be in the name of the participant employee. So it is theirs to take and do with as they wish. So it is portable. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There will be a separate split dollar agreement between each participant and Tahoe Forest that will detail out what happens in the event that the employee decides to leave the organization between today when they participate and retirement and or leave the organization on a short-term basis. The agreement will clearly state that the loan receivable will be paid out of the death benefit, without exception, and there will basically be a lien. So that death benefit has to go to Tahoe Forest to pay off the loan receivable first and foremost. Some of the other intricacies of the employment agreement with how sticky we can make it are still to be determined and will be ironed out between now and the implementation of the plan. There's a couple
how does it generally work? I realize that each time is unique, but how does it generally work?
In general, most companies would say, hey, if you leave the organization, that the loan is in basically stays in place until the death benefit is paid out. Every once in a while, there's an organization that says the loan must be paid back if you leave us, before retirement. That's it. Typically becomes a sticking point because in an employee's mind, they say, "Gosh, if I borrowed $50,000 a year over 5 years, I owe $250,000 plus minor interest for this loan receivable. Do I really want to pull it out of the plan to pay it back? Do I have other dollars I can pull from?" So most of the time, the loan is paid back when the death benefit is paid out at some point in the future. And the employees look at it as a loyalty retention component where they're able to put dollars away for, that future retirement. That being said, Ms. Brown, it can be structured a variety of different ways on how we can ensure we're getting the right amount of retention and stickiness and attraction value to it.
Any questions from our board? I see some hands up in our audience, so.
Yeah, I have one, Alice.
Okay.
On slide 11, you mentioned that a voluntary plan was offered in 2019 and there was no participation. Do we have any input from key employees today that this would be a favorable plan? Or how do we anticipate participation being greater than zero? And if there is no participation, what is the cost? Is there a cost for us just to get this all set up? Or how does that work?
So Alex or Harry, could you take the first question? Because that was more of a historical basis. And I want to make sure that the facts of what that situation was in the voluntary plan are clear in an answer. Would you mind taking that first question? Then I'm happy to take the second one.
Yeah, I'll start, and Harry, feel free to jump in. One of our major faults was probably the marketing of that. It was very close to when the pandemic started. And, so that had a lot to do with this. Harry, what would you add?
And I think that clearly we just put it on hold with the tremendous number of issues we were dealing with and even the financial uncertainty of it. But I think when somebody looks at all of the quality issues here, where you have a defined 5-year period or 10-year period where you set the dollars aside pre-tax in a well-established, legally correct situation, and then at age 65 you can begin to draw them out totally tax-free, keeping always a retirement benefit, and then it's a win. It's one of the very few really win-wins, tremendous wins out there, that all of the structured payments that come out to the person, like a defined benefit plan, are 100% tax-free. And we just didn't market it in that way. And so I think once people understand that this has been done in hundreds of companies for thousands of people, and we wanted to bring something really excellent to our team that would really differentiate our company better than any other company on a tried and true basis. We just didn't take time to market it with the advent of the pandemic.
And if I could add, one of the things we found in our decades of experience working with organizations, really the number one reason why voluntary plans are not taken advantage of is the enrollment, education, and communication process is lacking. So we identified that many, many years ago. And so our process, and you'll see at the end of the presentation that we have an implementation schedule. And that basically defines out a well thought out, what we call, on the media approach. So EBS will do group meetings, group presentations. Those will also be recorded. We typically do a couple of those to make sure we can accommodate people's schedules. Then we have one-on-one, meetings with folks to walk them through if they like to participate, if it makes sense. We'll do the right amount of modeling. If they'd like to have a spouse, a CPA, a financial advisor, CFP involved in that conversation, we welcome that. And we try to make sure it's as one-on-one and hand-holding as possible, so each person's individual financial situation is addressed and they feel comfortable going forward. It's very high touch, it's very concierge-like, and it's something that we're really, really good at. And so that's something that will be at the table here. And to answer your question, if EBS goes through that entire process and there's not a single voluntary participant, that's on us and our time, and we really appreciate the opportunity. Of course, we'd be disappointed because we think a lot of good thought has gone into this, but we feel confident that and based on other organizations with similar plans, that there's going to be good, I'll say, healthy participation, and that we can report back to you on that. So no cost to the organization if no one participates. It's just on EBS and our team.
Yeah, Harry, Dale here. Have you had a discussion with any not-for-profit CEOs who have similar plans and how well they've been accepted and how well they work for them?
This is something I knew of prior to Tahoe Forest, but in the healthcare industry, it's not well known. In the Fortune 100 and Fortune 500, it's very well known. And when we listened and met with all of our physicians as we had to do the required IRS transition, and we listened to programs that we had, we said we need something that's equal or better than any defined benefit plan they had, or something that's even better than our 401k program, that over a period of time, you can set those same dollars aside, more dollars aside. But the thing that makes it unequal is that 100% of the dollars that you draw out are legally tax-free, which you don't get in any other personally developed defined benefit plan or from our own retirement plans. And you always have an insurance benefit available for your family as well. And so, in my opinion, it's better than our 401k plan. I'm too old to benefit from it, but I still wanted to make sure we brought the very best tool for our team.
Okay, I'd like to go to audience participation. I see some hands up. Mary,
One more question. And that has to do with participation. So I understand the physicians are eligible for this. What about the APPs? And if they're not eligible for this, what is their retirement benefit?
They can be easily a part of this as well. So that's all subject to our design. This is our preliminary discussion.
Okay, thank you.
okay, Director McGarry, you look like you were going to say something.
Nope.
Okay, I see some hands up. Dr. Koch, your hand is up.
Yes. So the question that I have is that when you look at many of the people who might be considered for participation in this plan, I'm asking if it is going to help them, for example, and in what way will it help them to buy a home? Because there are many who struggle to live in this community with a high cost of living. And so while a retirement plan sounds like a good idea, and I think I heard some things you said that would help a younger person who's trying to decide how to best allocate their income. Is there a benefit to them, and what is that benefit if they're trying to buy a home or in some other way establish themselves in the community so that they can financially survive here?
Alice, if I can maybe address that too. We have, via our workforce housing agency, we actually have down payment assistance available in addition to savings programs that a person has. And we do have a limited down payment assistance primarily for hard to recruit individuals approved by our health system as well. So in addition to saving and so forth, our workforce housing agency is available to kind of explain all things housing and how to plan for that. And there are multiple down payment assistance programs available right now.
Yeah, and I think though what Dr. Koch is also asking is, does this plan help in any way? And the tax benefits is what he's saying.
It doesn't year by year. This would be money that a person has adequate cash flow to set aside. This would be for individuals who would normally want to set this aside in your personally crafted defined benefit plan or some other creative program that you have. And now we're offering you that specific program. Some of our physicians have told us they crafted a program and it matured out at 10 years. Well, guess what? Now you have an opportunity. Not only do you have your previous plan, but now you have a new plan to continue to increase your quality of life when you retire.
Okay. So, Dr. Koch, you must have asked the question that other people wanted because the hands went away. Does anybody else in the audience have a question for Trevor or anything about the split dollar? Okay, this is for board action, so we're going to have a vote on it. And now's the time to ask the question.
Director Wong, I'm not sure if you wanted to have Trevor show the example that he put together, if that would be valuable to you, but I think he's prepared to do that.
You can, yeah, that would be nice if it's not going to be lengthy.
The details on this will make your mind swim.
Yeah, and you can't see it very well.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to see his slides?
I guess one additional question I'd like to ask before you jump to the slide is, again, is there a net cost to the hospital for this? Obviously, every individual can make his or her own decision to participate or not to participate, but I'm seeing Trevor say no, that there is no net cost.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it was specifically structured to be what I will call financially neutral to Tahoe Forest. So from a income statement standpoint and a balance sheet standpoint, it was structured to be neutral. Now I know that someone could call out and say, well, what about the money that's not being paid? Is there opportunity costs to that money going somewhere else? Sure, there's always going to be that in the analysis, but it was specifically set up to be voluntary. Even the match itself that Tahoe Forest is offering essentially is also a loan essentially to the participant. Mm-hmm. The loan receivable, the loan sitting out there will have to have an interest rate on it, and the interest rate that is contemplated is going to be what's called AFR, applicable federal rate. The government posts a minimal interest rate for such arrangements, and that's typically these days it's somewhere around 2 or 3%. So it's a marginal interest amount. But it was really structured to be able to be financially neutral for Tahoe Forest. So it would be a very easy decision for the directors to be able to feel good about, and for the organization to essentially implement.
So do we as a board of directors and as a hospital, in recommending or offering a plan like this, have any fiduciary responsibility?
I certainly have fiduciary responsibility for representing a financial product.
Sure.
But from a true fiduciary responsibility, that's a very good question. I think there's going to be one that would be certainly implied as an organization that is entering into a financial agreement with an employee that talks about shifting dollars from salary into another plan. So I think my non-legal opinion, and while I play a lawyer on TV, sometimes they don't like me doing it 8 to 5. I would say that there could be, but I would say it's a best question to be answered perhaps by General Counsel at Tahoe Forest to make sure that it's appropriately addressed.
Okay.
Yeah,
We do have an audience.
In a 401k.
We have somebody in the audience. Your attention, please. We still have a hand up in the audience. So, Dr. Fountain, are you there?
Yeah, Alice, thank you very much. I just have one quick question. So I was extremely interested in this plan when it was presented in 2019 and heavily looked into it. In fact, Trevor, you and I spoke on several occasions. I have 2 questions which were very concerning to me in regards to this plan. First and foremost, I was informed that this plan had to be negotiated prior to becoming an employee. Please discuss that particular topic, as many of us have already engaged in employment. The second question is, I was also on the impression that there was a large financial penalty if I pulled out soon or early. And I know you've mentioned on that topic, but one of the things I'm really concerned with is I wasn't interested in it because of that penalty. And I think that the board should recognize that if we do leave early, that was going to deter me from participating.
Alex and Harry, I'm going to ask you both. I don't recall details of something having to be figured out ahead of employment. Are you familiar with what that?
No, I don't. That's, with all due respect, that's the first I've heard of it, because it can only be started officially once you are an employee. The program only works where the source of your W-2 is. So that is a prerequisite. You have to first be an employee to have it. And I apologize if there was somehow somebody out there suggested you had to do it before employment. It's a thoughtful 5-year plan into the future, just like any physician who might set up their own custom defined benefit plan when they had their own business. So it does have that kind of planning for the future. I think in terms of, I like to think of this as really like a 10-year plan, but there are ways you can leave and still keep it in an equilibrium state. But I think I would defer to Trevor for any penalty kind of issue.
And I don't recall us having a conversation in 19, and I apologize for that. And I wasn't involved in the original plan to be able to even comment on it. There really is not a financial penalty, as there would be in pulling out retirement dollars from a qualified fund, like a qualified plan, like a 401k or an IRA. There's typically a 10% tax, as it were, on dollars that you pull out in addition to income tax that you pull out of those plans. This plan does not have any said penalties. The only, I guess, penalty we could describe would be one, if you're pulling dollars out early, you're not going to have accumulated dollars for retirement that you may have planned for. And certainly if there's anything else Tahoe Forest would like to put into an individual agreement regarding retention or leaving early and paying that loan back early, I suppose you could consider that to be somewhat of a penalty, but I don't think that's in the spirit of the question you're asking. So there really isn't a penalty pulling out dollars early outside of the performance of the plan over a long period will be affected if dollars are coming out earlier. I hope I answered that question. I'm happy to explore it further with you.
Okay.
This is Director Barnett. I have a couple of questions here. Looking at the plan, there's a list of about 50 employees that would be eligible for this. All of them, those employees make minimum $250,000 to $500,000. And in each of those plans, if they all decided to go on it, we would have to, as a hospital, we would be making dollar contributions, which we don't get back till they die, which could be, 20 to 40 or 50 years later. And I'm wondering how in the world we could ever realistically budget to have any sense of how much this is actually going to cost the hospital. This is like signing up for an indefinite payment.
Director Barnett, remember that these are the dollars going into this plan are dollars that would have been paid in salary to the employee anyway. So we're basically shifting dollars. The employee has the ability to shift dollars from salary today, same dollars, and put it into the plan. So, and then when they put it into the plan, it's basically a loan receivable. And so that way, from a balance sheet standpoint, we've taken a payroll expense and we've turned it into an asset, if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty accounting of it. So I would actually say that the financial impact to Tahoe Forest is different than what you're suggesting, because the dollars going into it would have been gone away in salary. So it's shifting it to a different bucket.
But there's a 15% match on contributions up to $50,000. That would be for each of those 50 employees. That's in addition to what you're talking about, correct?
Correct, but that would also be factored into the loan receivable. So essentially, the employee is borrowing that match that will then be paid back out of the death benefit.
Right, so we pay it out of our pocket now and we get it back in 30 or 40 years when they die. Now, that's my point. How do you budget for that?
Well, one of the things we contemplated was in the presentation, we did do some estimations based on what we thought participation would be. As much as I'd love to have 50 happy participants in the plan, we never get 100% voluntary participation. No. And so the numbers that we describe in terms of who we expect are going to be far less than that. I'd be happy to flip through the presentation and put that up. And that was something that was contemplated for, projection purposes.
Yeah, I would like to see that. I don't know if the others, and if I'm boring people to death on this point, but I am concerned about the cost of the hospital because the 2019 plan did not have a cost to the hospital. And I'm happy with the plan, but I'm worried about what it's going to cost the hospital and how we budget for it.
So this is on page 20 of the detailed report that was included. Let me see if I can make this bigger, just a moment. can't figure out how to make it bigger at the very moment, Director Barnett. But this is on page 20 of the
Yeah,
PowerPoint.
I've got it. I've got it on my other laptop, so I'm looking.
Okay. So this is basically where we decided we would estimate what the contributions were. And we just did this based on, here's our assumptions. Basically the short-term costs of the company is the cash flow outlay of the company match. And then we did some estimates based on age, compensation, years of service, other voluntary plans. Be able to figure out what that potential, cost could be to Tahoe Forest. So then, of course, we have this page here where we're trying to estimate the contributions. And then we got to the potential financial impact. We're basically trying to say, here's what this could be on an aggregate basis. So, to your point, there is a cash flow cost in the short term. I would be shocked if we had 50 participants times $7,500 maximum match on an annual basis going forward. I would say that would be not probable because it's a voluntary plan and people typically have a lot of reasons for why they put dollars in or don't put dollars into a voluntary plan.
So if you did have 50 people that use the full max over a 5-year period, it'd be 2.5 million or 500,000 per year. If that level of match is uncomfortable, we do respect that and, could go back and, discuss other match options. But if 50 people matched and stayed in the program, that'd be roughly 500,000 a year of employer match.
Thanks, Harry. That's the answer I wanted, and I am concerned about the match amount. The 2019 plan didn't have that match amount, and I think with inflation, we've got a lot of other issues coming up here that we'll probably be discussing when we look at our financial statement. I just don't want us to get overburdened. On the other hand, I want the employees to have access to a plan. I just worry about hospitals' budget on that. So that's my concern.
No, we respect that.
I don't remember if we calculated out how much the hospital would be saving in employer tax monies.
We did, and I'm having trouble between screens and a printed version, pulling up the appropriate pages for the questions. But Alex, we did contemplate that. It was towards the back. It was in the, after the sample presentation, a sample participation illustration for the individual. So it'd be on page 20 plus. I'm trying to see if I can flip to it really quickly. Page 26. So here's where we, on page 26, and Director Barnett, this might be part of your question. Here's where we looked at the, basically the projected cash flow and P&L comparison, as well as from cash compensation to split dollar to be able to see what the difference was between paying employees versus dollars going into the split dollar plan. And then we've also, of course, did it for the balance sheet. So we designed it to be favorable, I would say, to Tahoe. I understand your point, and I think what you're basically saying is any match, might be something, cause for hesitation. And that's something that, of course, that the board and the executive team have discussed if they'd like to look at it a little bit differently.
No, I get that. The payroll taxes are 2.45%. So there's a little savings, but it doesn't offset what what we're being asked to contribute.
Hey, Jonathan Lowe has a comment, and I think we need to close the discussion and either table this for a further meeting or to do a vote on it. But Jonathan, if you'll undo your mute and speak.
Yes, thank you so much. My question is, if we're putting money into an account like this that is income from California, and then withdraw the money in retirement in a different state, does California do as good of a job as I know they can do at taxing at the California rate? when that money is pulled out? Is it tied to California taxes?
It's a great question. What you want to research is what's called the source tax provision. The IRS allows that if dollars are put away for a retirement in a plan like this, and a distribution is taken over at least a 10-year period, the state income tax that would be charged would be the state income tax in the state of residency over that 10-year period. So for example, let's use something very real to folks here. If you work in California and you're contributing to the plan for your career, and you decide you're going to retire and go across the border to Nevada, which has, of course, zero state income tax, and you take distributions over 10 years, California and the Franchise Tax Board cannot collect state income tax on those dollars. It's called the source tax provision. It's a little known nuance in the income tax regimes out there. So I think that answers your question, but it has to be contemplated and of course thought out about at least a 10-year period in order for that to be considered something you could do.
Could I ask the board if they have enough information that they would like to make a motion?
Mary, if I could, I didn't get an answer to my question. I'm hoping David Ruderman could bring in on the issue of fiduciary responsibility, both for the hospital and our board here.
That's an issue that I'd have to research, Director Shamblin. It's not one that I've looked at previously. So I'd have to get back to you on that.
So let's table this discussion, not do a vote on it until we have answers. It sounds like that we're not getting everything we want, and there's a lot of discussion. Harry, what are your thoughts about bringing this back?
We're happy to do that, and maybe even look at a different model that has a different match and so forth. And this would be just kind of the first phase, but we respect your questions and your concern, and we can bring it back.
Okay.
Yeah, just
again, Trevor, thank you for your information, but it's a lot to absorb, and I think now, especially with what we are in our economy, that people have to really think about a lot of other issues as well. So we appreciate that, and we look forward to hearing more about the plan, or at least something that will be a benefit to our executive staff, our providers, et cetera. So thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. I'm happy to be available for questions. Alex and Harry, probably makes sense for the questions to come through you to us to make sure that you're included in them, but our contact information is in the back of the presentation, and we of course are happy to answer any ongoing questions from anybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Trevor.
I'm going to do a chairman duty, or an advantage I have as chairman. I am going to move our items for board discussion around and move 16.2 burnout recovery improvement up before we get into board education on the No Surprise Act. So I think we have, Harry, you're going to start us off on the burnout recovery.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Chair and members of the Board of Directors and our medical staff members and our public that have joined us this evening. We really want to thank our medical staff and our non-medical staff members for their interest in the national and international topic of burnout and burnout recovery and increasing joy in the workplace. As we look at a variety of information, talk to folks, there's a national and an international phenomena that has occurred in healthcare companies and non-healthcare companies that burnout has touched every single company out there, and certainly no hospital has been spared, and that does include us as well. And so as we work on these kinds of important topics out there, we respectfully ask that we always choose to approach these kinds of issues as from the perspective of a glass half full, and as this will help set a foundation for an ever improving future. We do believe that a holistic approach is really needed. We're going to move the needle forward in a positive way better than other companies out there. And that's something that we're committed to do. And certainly our principles and methods and so forth have also begun to be talked about in our town hall sessions that have been had. In our new strategic plan very nicely sets a great framework for within the people section to begin working on this and other important matters. Just a few elements of, organizations around us that are telling us what they hear. I spoke just yesterday to the CEO of iProtein. It's the online governance education company connected with the American Hospital Association, and they provide online education to all of us as well. And as he talks to leaders and board members across the country, burnout is probably the most significant issue across America. And he mentioned that the trend is getting worse. He did use a unique analogy. He said, if we were in an Olympic, kind of metaphor, that topic would win gold, silver, and bronze. I thought was an interesting analogy in all of the hospitals that they're seeing across America. Another important anecdote is we spoke with a physician leader in the Bay Area just this week who leads 4,000 physicians. And I asked her two questions. I said, do you have a burnout issue? And she said, yes, and that it's more than 50% of her physicians. And then I asked her, I said, well, is your trend getting better or is it getting worse? And she did reply that it's getting much worse. We've reached out to and we regularly do, to our CEOs in the region, and have done that recently, and they report that this is a very tough topic that's still not trending in the right direction. One of many factors that's contributing to burnout is large numbers of job openings requiring overtime, huge amounts of travelers and so forth. For example, in the San Francisco market, what we were hearing is that there's more than 3,000 healthcare job openings. In the Sacramento area, we estimate more than 2,000. In the Reno area, more than 1,800 job openings. We have a few job openings here at Tahoe Forest, and we have the lowest employee turnover of any company in the area. And we're also being told by healthcare workers with the turmoil that's going on out there that our company is becoming more attractive each year as they're finding a variety of negatives in their current environment. We also are hearing on a regular basis from leaders from our Reno health systems that are saying that Tahoe Forest Health System is making their lives very difficult with the culture, the work environment, and other key variables that we have here. All of those being said, we're a great company, but we're also an imperfect company. We recognize that, and we want to continue to improve. And so as we have been engaging with the medical staff and others, and I believe our medical staff has asked us to share this with the board as well, I'm going to cover just a few things very quickly. One of our first areas to be sensitive to medical staff needs is we've elevated the chief medical officer role to a full-time 40 hours plus role. Dr. Gary Gray has been here for a little bit less than 3 months, minus his vacations, and he's had an opportunity to really talk to many of our staff members, read our surveys, read our focus group notes, which are extensive, talk to various medical staff members, and begin to propose strategies coming back to Tahoe Forest Health System leadership. And we've actually authorized many areas of progress that we believe that will improve joy, patient care, function, and access. And just a very few of those positive changes we've made, and there are many more, is that we've tried to bring in place actual or virtual scribes to help our providers. We've deployed advanced practice providers in many different settings to improve access, to assist physician issues in a variety of areas, whether it's script refill, inbox, my chart, phone calls. We've also deployed nurses into our clinics to help out with a variety of areas. We did perform a complete lean operational overview in our pediatric program, and we're open to do that in other areas. And we've actually moved clinic team members, including advanced practice providers, into our GI service area to help them. We've also offered tuning of the Epic system to help. And then we're also completely remodeling the second floor of, after many other remodels of our 3-story medical office building, to greatly improve workflow and to also add mental health as well. And I want to turn it over to Dr. Gary Gray, our interim chief medical officer. I think he has some thoughtful information that he'd like to share with us. So thank you.
All right, so good evening, everybody. Thanks for the time. I'm going to try to share my screen, so hopefully I'll do it right here. All right, so you guys are seeing a slide without my notes, I assume?
No.
No, Gary, we're still looking at the Zoom. Martina might have to enable it.
Okay. If I have it up, let me.
Co-host. I can run next door if I need to, too.
Okay, let me try one more time. So I'm going to bring this up, hit share.
Now you got it.
Start from the beginning, and now you see a slide without my notes, correct?
Right.
Yeah, what's burnout?
Yeah, all right, you got it.
We see your notes too. We see your notes too.
I'll just leave them there. I don't know how to stop it, but or I can just make them go away. And anyway, you know, I'm just going to have about 7 slides. Most of these slides have been shared with the Joint Medicine folks. Gave a similar presentation to the Medical Executive Committee, but I added a few slides, I think, just for the board just for the board. So really, you know, if you look nationally, you know, burnout rates are running 40 to 60%, depending upon specialty. If you look nationally, actually, emergency medicine physicians have the highest rate. I think dermatologists have the lower rate. You know, our clinicians here at Tahoe Forest have similarly high levels of burnout, but I really want to point out that we have pockets that are exceedingly high, exceptionally high, like top percentile high, and you know, most, if you were to kind of take our provider groups and divide them into subgroups, you know, primary care and our APPs are the groups that I think are disproportionately impacted. But it is a system-wide issue for the Tahoe Forest physician and APP workforce. You know, I think it's interesting. Most people think of burnout as being a late career phenomenon, but the reality is younger physicians are at actually increased risk for stress-related work issues than older colleagues. And we have to be mindful that even people coming right out of training into our organization, you know, are in fact, you know, at risk for burnout. I really want to, you know, share with the board that burnout is not an individual. It's not attributed to individual factors. Healthcare providers, by and large, are very resilient folks. That's how they made it as far as they have, right? So really, I want to frame the notion of burnout and engagement really as a system issue. It's a system issue, not an individual issue. And the focus really needs to be on the system. This is a slide from the AMA. It really looks at the drivers of burnout, and you know, all these little stop signs here essentially, you know, represent areas that we as leaders and as a hospital system can focus on to improve the provider experience. And why is this important? You know, burnout negatively impacts the providers, it negatively impacts patient care, and it negatively impacts cost to the organization. So where do we need to focus? It's really, I'm going to go to my next slide. if you look, the changing landscape has had a profound impact on clinicians. What clinicians are expected to do today is distinctly different from what I did as a family physician 25 years ago. We have different workloads. We have very heavy administrative burdens. We have many interruptions and distractions. We have technology that doesn't always deliver usability. We have time pressures. We have difficult and challenging patients. We have job resources where sometimes it's hard to find meaning and purpose in some of the work the docs are expected to do. It's impacted by organizational culture. What is the organization value? Is medical staff, are the clinicians aligned with the values and expectations of the organization? Are we in agreement there? Do we have sufficient rewards for our providers? Do we support professional relationships and social support, which has been really hard over the past 2 years? And do we support and value work-life, integration in general? So, it's very helpful, I think, to have a contextual framework and kind of a roadmap as to, where we need to go. And I really, this is from Tate Shannenfeld, who's now director of the Physician Wellbeing Program at Stanford. He came from Mayo Clinic. I believe he was one of the originators of the Mayo Wellbeing Index. But, we really need to move along the continuum to the right column here. I think, Tahoe Forest has done a good job of focusing on providers in distress and providing resources. I really applaud the work that Joy in Medicine, Wellbeing, and Dr. Cole and others have done to create resources for providers in distress. But, the bigger question is how did we get here and what do we need to change to prevent this from getting worse and to actually create a path towards improvement? And it's really focusing on the third column. It's focusing on the needs of people. It's especially focusing on preventing distress, not treating distress. How do we create an aligned autonomy and shared responsibility? And how do we create physician and administration collaboration? How do we do joint decision-making moving forward? And I really think that's where we need to focus, a considerable amount of our time and efforts. So if you look at the literature, what are the key strategies that can make a difference? We've done efforts that have been working to increase system efficiency. You create a culture of quality and service excellence. We need to put physicians and APPs in clinical leadership roles, and we need to involve physicians and APPs in all of our major planning activities. Planning can't happen in a silo. It can't be administration. It has to be the providers have to have a seat at the operational table in order for us to move together as a unit and improve the work to improve the work environment for our clinicians. There have been a host of local initiatives. Harry mentioned most of them. I'm going to focus predominantly on, over the last couple of months, most of my conversations with leadership and with the medical staff has really been on trying to commit, it's been around the notion of developing physician and APP leadership. And so I'm going to spend a little bit more time there. So kind of based on, global feedback. So I've looked at multiple surveys, SCORE surveys, Press Ganey, several years of Press Ganey. I've met with provider groups. I've met with MEC. I haven't met with everybody, to be totally transparent. But if you start looking at feedback from focus groups, SCORE debriefing, there's kind of 5 big buckets that tend to be very consistent. And they're really themes that carry across the whole, kind of all the surveys and most of the groups. That includes, physician compensation. So physician compensation that's aligned with with agreed upon objectives and goals. It's really critical evaluation of our access center. I think there's been a lot of discussion around access, but from our physician standpoint, we need to make certain that the right patient sees the right doctor in the right time slot. That's just a basic premise that we need to be able to work towards support our physicians in that. So we need to look at our access center and figure out, how do we make it more responsive to both our patients and physicians' needs. I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to save this one for last. We need to continue to work on our electronic health record optimization. Harry mentioned, we've deployed non-direct patient care nurses to help with refills and some other administrative tasks. We've done scribes, but there's still more that we need to do to optimize our electronic health record for our docs. We need to focus really intently on clinic operations. We need to acknowledge that we have clinics that appear to be very high performing, and we have clinics that are not performing as high. We need to figure out, how do we replicate those high performing clinics? What's unique about those high performers, and how do we replicate those activities in our lower performing clinics? And we do have Tegria coming in to look at our primary care clinics. I believe they're actually kicking off in October. I think that, the path to move forward, and based upon my previous experience with other organizations, what I see as an element that is lacking or not well developed here is really, the physician and APP leadership, physician and APP leadership presence and support for leadership development and time given to our docs for leadership. We have to align, we have to move together forward. We're never going to address the pebbles in the doctor's shoes without having the doctors have a seat at the table with the rest of us who are responsible for operations. So I think I'm going to end there, because I know there's a lot of medical staff members. I think their comments are far more important than mine. So I'll stop there, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Harry, do you have any other comment before I'm going to open it up to the board and then to the audience? I didn't know if anybody else Alex was going to speak.
No, I think we're ready to, we wanted our medical staff to be able to share as well, as we're sharing this with the board too.
All right, but according to protocol, I'll open it up to the board first to ask any questions or make any comments, and then we'll follow it up with audience. Any comments from our board?
Yeah, this is Director Barnett. I think what Dr. Gray just presented was very useful, and I took some notes on it. I'm very interested in hearing, from physicians and nurses assistants and others, because it gives some color to the sense of what they're facing. And as a board member, it helps to understand what their daily lives are like and how they're impacted by this. And I think there are probably issues that we'll need to talk about perhaps in depth, because to me, this is one of the most important issues. I'm not sure, the board isn't here to figure it out. The board is to support the process of making it better. And I think that's what we have to think about.
Yep. Okay. And again, I want to reiterate, we're not here to fix the problem. We want to hear it. We want to be a strategic board and help with discussing the solutions to it, bringing all of us to the table. So with that, any other board members?
I'm just anxious to hear the discussion.
Yes. Okay.
Likewise. Yeah.
Well, some of you have had your hands up longer than others. So we'll start with the A's. I see Portia Adams, who is one of our PAs, has her hand up. Do you want to go ahead, Portia? You've got your 3 minutes to say your presentation.
Thank you for your time this evening, Board of Directors. Portia Adams, PA in Occupational Health and the IDPC Chair currently. Thank you so much, Dr. Gray, for your evaluation. It was very detailed and very accurate. I have to applaud the health system for embracing the use of advanced practice providers. In my time here, we have gone from a half dozen to more than 30 NPs and PAs. We live in the perfect location for an amazing work-life balance. So what is the root of such poor SCORE survey results specifically related to burnout? Recently, retention has become an issue with APPs in certain departments. This is directly related to job satisfaction. A study I recently read from a hospital in Brazil in 2018, you would think obviously these issues are much more apparent since COVID, titled The Relationship Between Job Satisfaction, Burnout Syndrome, and Depressive Symptoms, noted that efforts from healthcare system managers are necessary to provide improvements in the work environment, as well as to address the demands that emerge over time. Therefore, it will be possible to determine an appropriate career management that will prevent healthcare professionals from becoming unsatisfied and ultimately leaving their profession. I have hopes. While different departments have different struggles, I think presence of directors and their openness to discuss issues, listen and act on concerns of the APPs, and ultimately will establish better relationships as well as better understandings of operations. It's impossible to have job satisfaction when you feel replaceable. I have hope that the recently posted APP lead will work closely with both the APPs in each department, the managers, directors, and administration to increase job satisfaction for all APPs in the health system.
Okay.
Thank you.
Portia, that it for you. Thank you so much for your presentation. And somewhere along the line, I heard the word hope come out. I'm not sure it came out of you, but I thought it was appropriate because we all have hope. We hope that we can resolve some of these issues and move forward. So then I see a hand up, Dr. Ritchie, David Ritchie's hand.
Hi, guys.
Okay.
Thank you for hearing me out. I'd like to applaud the board actually for inviting the physicians to speak. This is the first time I've ever spoken before a hospital board. I think it's important and I thank you. I like where I work and I appreciate Tahoe Forest very much. I think one of the biggest things I like about Tahoe Forest is when I walk into a patient's room, and by the way, I'm one of the hospitalists at Tahoe Forest. I co-direct the program. One of the best things I like about here is that when I walk into a room, it is rare that I have to do any recovery with a patient, meaning that they are happy with their care. They are very happy with the hospital system. I will routinely hear a patient say, I am so impressed with every single member that I have encountered at this hospital, every single employee. It is heartwarming, and this is a wonderful place to work. My frustration at Tahoe Forest is that I would like to see a focus on physician satisfaction in the same way that there is a focus on patient satisfaction. We have a decent pay structure. We have a decent bonus structure. We have a good system in place. There are some things that are broken. One of them is the structure with our health stream and our physician bonus structure in terms of engagement. The idea is wonderful. We actually have a system in place now that did not exist before that allows us to get paid for attending meetings, such as this one, by the way. We need to have a structure that is less broken so that we are not getting nickel and dimed, and that when I work for Tahoe Forest in whatever capacity, whether that is seeing patients or going to a board meeting or going to a tumor board or going to the first two medical meetings, medicine committee meetings of the year, that I get paid for what I do. we feel universally undervalued for this. And this is not just me. I wouldn't be saying this if I hadn't spoken to many, many, many other staff that agree with this. We need to be paid for our time. Dr. Gray has been wonderful in asking about these situations and asking about our opinions. And he hit the nail on the head when he said that we don't have appropriate interaction and engagement with the physicians and the APPs and the nurse practitioners that are here. We need to have that engagement. You guys need us and we need you. The only way that...
I'm going to have you wrap it up. David,
Sorry.
we do need you.
And thank you.
Okay. Gina Barda, you had your hand up. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm just unmuting myself. Hi, I'm Gina Barda, and I'm a family physician and have taken care of patients here since 1999. And thank you for giving us our 3 minutes. I wanted to mention some things that have helped us in the last 3 years and that bring up some things that need to be improved. Investing in behavioral health has been great. I did this for 20 years with no help. So even though we need even more help with this, it's great to have the support. Another thing that I think was mentioned, but has been very helpful, is having registered nurses, RNs, to help field phone calls that require clinical training and handling medication refills. And this should continue and be implemented in all of the outpatient clinics, and not just having a medical assistant. One thing that helped was putting a lead in our Tahoe City office. It's a manager type to help with day-to-day issues. It took a long time to get it, but since getting it has helped both the physicians, mid-levels, and the staff. Having the respiratory clinic with the pandemic was a godsend to primary care. Otherwise, and I'll note that our manager for the first 2 years of the pandemic kept us all safe, and that was a lot due to having the respiratory clinic. Having the medication assistant treatment clinic that's run by Jane Newhart Parks has also been very helpful to the community, but also to the ER and primary care. Things that need to be improved. We need more primary care physicians, as you've all heard, and an administration that will act on suggestions to support the foundation of our health system. And it's like Gary Gray said, is having a seat at the table to not only just hear what we have to say, but to act on it. More or most of the scheduling needs to be done by staff physically in the offices. The Access Center, it's a sort of a fool's goal to have people who are not physically in the offices with the physicians and providers be trying to figure out exactly when they need to be seen and by whom. It's just patients complain daily to me about this, and the phone tree needs to be improved. It doesn't feel like recommendations or suggestions or criticism given in surveys or emails are responded to in a timely fashion or are inconsistently responded to. So I would like to, I'm hoping giving my comments at this board meeting is the opportunity to get a meaningful response. And I'd recommend some sort of set schedule for feedback and suggestions and a time, of a time expected for a response. And related to that point, it's rare to see upper level management or administration in the clinical setting, and our practice leads and managers are present, but it's rare to see those from the higher level. And I would say that regular in-person visits to see what's going on, to share both successes and challenges, would be helpful for morale and nonverbal communication. And
Dr. Barda, I love all your suggestions, but your time is up.
Okay, so I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we've heard your suggestions. Okay, then I have above you is Nina Winan from Sports Medicine. Are you there, Nina?
I am. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share some of our concerns. And I also want to say that, so I've been here, I'm a sports medicine physician. I've been here for 28 years. And besides my clinical practice, I've been involved in medical leadership for many of those years. And it actually hit me when Dr. Gray did his presentation that, wow, did I actually give you all of those points, Dr. Gray? I'm sure others did too, but I do think that some of the points that are being brought up here are not new to being brought up. I think the biggest issue and the challenge that we all have is that we don't feel like there is any action on those plans that we have brought forward over time. To have medical leadership, we really need to have true empowerment. There has to be an openness to hear opposing views and to really have true, transparent discussions, and to feel there's a safety to bring in opposing views and to see action items move forward. Obviously, the score survey and the satisfaction rates, yes, there are issues across the country, but we're in the first percentile. 99% of other health systems are doing better than we are on burnout, and that's very concerning. So please engage all of us truly, and because we care a lot about our community. We're all here. We're ready to work. We're ready to be part of the solution. But it feels like we've been shut out. We haven't done a good job of really giving true respect, both financially and with time, for leadership. We're valued mainly on an RVU value, which is basically all about productivity. And it feels not very good when you work harder and harder and try to be part of a bigger solution, and that is not heard. One of my other biggest concerns right now is some of the changes in leadership that has happened in the last few years. We have much fewer, we hardly have any women representing in the true leadership in our executive suite at this point. We have a we have a significant majority of women in our overall organization. And we also have a pretty significant Latino population in our organization, and we need to really truly foster upward mobility and leadership within our organization, and have both our administration, executive leadership, and our board of directors, which have it be representative of who we are, both as a hospital, as an organization, and as a community. Some of my most rewarding things that I've done and I'm really appreciative of the support of developing a lot of our community outreach programs with MOUs with multiple community partners, and developing our certified athletic trainer programs. And it's been an amazing journey for me to be part of that, and really to have the thoughts about the program and develop it and see it come into action. But it's also been probably the worst financial decision I ever made in my life. I know that wasn't why I moved here, but we have to. I don't think tomorrow's leaders will do all the volunteer hours and the underpaid hours to be top level leaders in our community. And I think this calls for a major culture change. I appreciate you listening to us. And I hope we see some significant feedback in a timely fashion, and reports back, and that you engage us in the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for your input. I saw Dr. Lane at one time had his hand up, but he's disappeared. Oh, there he is. He does have his hand up.
He's back.
All right. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong thing. I want to keep my comments very brief. So I do want to share with the board that I'm hearing from many specialties significant frustration, and especially in the APPs. It's very concerning to me that our extremely poor satisfaction scores in 2020 were repeated essentially identical in 21. We made no we're not making moves on fixing this. This is a great place to work. And I think you're hearing from everyone. Everyone wants to be here. We want to fix the problems. And I applaud the board for getting comments directly from those who are frustrated or concerned. The comments that I get from many people is our level of frustration is the highest it's been in, well, Nina and many people who have been here 25, 30 years are saying this is the highest that it's been ever. Some of it, and not much of it, is related to contracts, but much of it is frustration in the workplace, in the clinics, how things are run. And I think absolutely this is a solvable solution, which makes it very frustrating. I would hate for us to lose some of our valuable clinicians because we're moving too slow or we're not addressing these concerns. We need stability in our provider workforce, and I look forward to the board getting a task force and figuring out how can we solve these things. I think many of these problems are low-hanging fruit that we can deal with. So I'd rather let the people who are having the frustration speak, and I'll step back. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Dr. Lane. Then I have Dr. Semerad. Your hand is up.
Thank you. Board members and board director, I really appreciate the opportunity to share a few comments. I'm going to keep my comments very brief with it. I think Dr. Gray did a fantastic job in highlighting things. I just want to emphasize a couple of points, from that discussion. The first is for somebody to not be here very long and to identify these issues so relatively quickly shows how obvious they are at the surface of the system. This has been an amazing group of physician colleagues to work with, and that is one of the things that drives physicians and APPs and nurse practitioners to continue to work in a place. The national issue with this is a big one. We are in the first percentile, which is horrific. But the national issue has been addressed by the Surgeon General, and I encourage the board members to read the Surgeon General's report on this, addressing healthcare worker burnout, which has specific directions for things like boards to help structure systems with and processes for their administration. And I encourage you all to read that, and you can find it just on the Surgeon General's website. I think the major issues here that have been addressed, I would bubble into twofold, is the lack of self-efficacy, the ability for a physician, APP, or nurse practitioner or provider to be able to intervene on issues and processes and see something happen for positive change. And then the second issue, which is related, is a structural issue with the lack of providers at levels of engagement in decision-making in this institution. Those are big structural issues that affect us on a day-to-day basis. The final point I will make is, as one of the providers who has interviewed at other institutions because of burnout at this institution, there are frank discussions at other institutions about this problem, and they market the ways that they are dealing with it as a opportunity and a reason to be recruited to that institution. So putting this together also shows that the ability to do this will help us retain, but also hopefully recruit exciting talent for an institution that has significantly grown as other institutions are doing the same. Thank you very much again for listening. I will keep my components to that, and I appreciate what you're trying to do for this health system.
Thank you, Dr. Semerad, for your pointed narrative there. We have Samantha Smith, one of our PAs, who would like to speak now.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm a primary care PA, and I also work on our Joy in Medicine committee. So you've heard a presentation from us before, and we would love to come back regularly and continue to update you on statistics within the organization. I first want to just thank the health system for support for the medical staff. I feel like we have accomplished some things over the last few years that are worth noting. The support for the Mayo Wellbeing Index has been really helpful. It's enabled us to capture a lot of really good information and data, as well as some of the other surveys and focus groups that have happened. I think Dr. Gray shared and was able to put together a lot of that information for you all. And then the support from the health system for the Nevada Physician Wellness Coalition has been really helpful. It enables us to provide resources for people who need counseling, and they provide a speaker series and workshops, which is really great. You know, I really like that slide that Dr. Gray shares where he talks about, wellness 1.0 and then moving on to 2.0, and how initially our focus in the health system has really been on the individuals and on support and resources. And I think what you're hearing is just an outpouring of frustration and desire to move into engagement from leadership to really work on a lot of the systemic issues. Hearing Dr. Gray present for the first time and just watching the faces of my colleagues, physicians, PAs, NPs, when he acknowledges that we have systemic issues that needs to be fixed, it's really a relief to hear that. So I want to thank you, Dr. Gray, for your work on that. And I think, just to underscore what some of my colleagues have said, we really need follow-up from leadership and engagement from leadership to create a more positive environment, working environment for us. You've heard the 99%. We're doing more poorly than 99% of our colleagues nationally. I'll just share, looking at the data from the last year at our institution alone, we have 58% of our physicians with high distress scores compared to 39% nationally. And for our APPs, 67% of our APPs have high distress scores compared to 27% nationally. So those kinds of scores are associated with medical errors, suicide. It's very, very concerning. And I just want to underscore that I appreciate that we are taking this seriously. Lastly, I want to underline something that Dr. Ritchie said, which was a request for a stronger focus on provider satisfaction. It is very frustrating in this organization to see that patients have multiple outlets for their dissatisfaction, but we do not have one person. So when we get a 4.8 out of 5-star review or a difficult or rude MyChart message from a patient, who is our person who will go to bat for us? We look to our colleagues because they're so stellar, but we need a person. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Samantha. We have a phone named Dan who has his hand up. So Dan, do you know how to work it so we can hear you? How to unmute yourself?
Hi, Alice. This is Dan Cole. Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate the board's opportunity to speak tonight. For the board who doesn't know me, I'm a 21-year orthopedic PA and surgical PA. I've been at Tahoe 4 since 2013, and I followed my spouse across multiple states and training sites. I've practiced at academic medical centers, private practice, community hospitals, and in Reno for 9 years prior to this on the trauma service. It's been great. When we moved our family here in 2004, I've been part of the medical staff as a family member of my wife until I joined the medical staff in 2013. And I just wanted to address a few of the topics that were brought up on the call tonight. One of them is repeated dialogue that burnout is a problem across the entire healthcare organization. But to Sam's points and others, through repeated surveys of our medical staff, and particularly our advanced practice providers, and the validated Mayo Wellness scores and the beta score surveys annually and repeatedly, we are actually worsening on our scores. And when we say that other organizations have this problem, I'm not aware of other organizations benchmarking at the level we do, which is the lowest percentile. So 99% in our wellness scores for beta score surveys demonstrate that we are the lowest scoring compared to our peer groups. And that should be very concerning for all, regardless of the national trend on burnout. We are statistically very different than other organizations. In my particular department, I'd like to address some issues that have contributed to burnout from my colleagues. And I would like to state to the board, I do have a deep concern for retaliation and hostile work environment from my feedback. I've already shared this with Dr. Gray, Scott Baker, and my direct leadership, but I'd like the board aware of this. We rolled over in 2020 to support the orthopedic service line, the acquisition of the private practice. We are expected to pick up 52 extra shifts at no additional compensation. And these are not normal shifts, which most people would think of. They're 26 10-hour shifts, 26 24-hour shifts. We went from 1.5 full-time equivalents to 1.7 full-time equivalents at the same compensation, but we were told we would not be required to cover all surgical specialties on call currently. And then at the time, we have been asked on call to cover not only orthopedics, but when we come into the room, we're also expected on call to do crash C-sections, stat C-sections, gallbladders, appendectomies, bowel resections, and any other additional surgical cases besides our orthopedic duties and our weekly duties in the clinic. While all of my colleagues and I have expressed great satisfaction, the workload is overwhelming. We had requested leadership to review our performance, and financially, we outperformed all of our benchmarks and were repeatedly told each year for the last 3 years that we would no longer be required to cover these additional duties on call along with our clinical duties. And there was no change. Last summer, we asked for an outside benchmarking, and the board may be familiar with executive benchmarking company called Sullivan Cotter, who does executive and physician benchmarking. And they now have one of the largest APP databases. And they made multiple suggestions for the organization on ways they can improve our work environment with their final report in September. And none of these were implemented. And 3 months later, 40% of my department resigned. The remaining department was left to cover the burden through our busy ski season. And the board may also be aware, it's been reported repeatedly, that February, March, and April have been our busiest production months ever for orthopedics and surgery and revenue. But all of this was put onto the remaining staff. There has been no solutions to date. Rehiring of staff takes many months, if not years. We currently have a new practitioner who's coming in who will take 6 to 12 months before she's clinically competent. When the PAs were fully implemented in the orthopedics clinic, we saw wait times drop to less than 1 to 2 weeks for scheduling of appointments, and we offered walk-in appointments. Currently, the board may be aware that orthopedics is averaging approximately 6 weeks to have an appointment scheduled. I think this is very distressing. I think our patients should have the access to care, but I also think that the staff should be treated in a manner that reflects the industry standards. And even with external benchmarking, we've seen no change in our department. As a member of the community,
have you sum it up for us, please?
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I love my job. I love the people I work with. My local leadership is fantastic, but we have not been able to move the needle above our local leadership. And I hope to see that change so that we don't see the attrition that we've already experienced, and we're able to hire and retain new providers and improve access in the orthopedic services. Thank you.
Okay. So are there any further comments? I think we've got Dr. Koch. Unmute yourself.
So I just wanted to say that I anticipate remaining a part of the medical leadership for the foreseeable future. And as such, I have been speaking to providers across the health system. And I think that the number of physicians and advanced clinicians that showed up at this meeting tonight is a really clear statement that we do not feel heard within our departments or within the places that we can communicate. We do not feel heard. We do not feel that our needs are being met. I don't think you would have had 78 participants in this meeting had that not been the case. And I am very grateful for this opportunity for us to present to you. And I just want to emphasize the importance of being heard and having a response to what we say. Not that we always get our way, but that we have a dialogue, that we have a seat at a table that allows us to participate and have some control over our destiny. Because I think that lack of control over our destiny has a powerful detrimental effect on us. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Koch, for your comments. Shawnee Cole has her hand raised.
Hi, board. It's great to see you guys again, and thank you for listening. And like Dr. Cook said, I'm so impressed with our medical staff and the engagement that they have. You know, they heard this topic was going to be on, and we had 50 plus people on the call, and that's truly, truly amazing. And kudos to all of you. I just want to give a recent example of how the medical staff may feel devalued, may feel burnt out because of things that have happened. It was not anything I was directly involved in, but there was a clinical management team that had, I think, 5 to 7 people on it. They met for a couple separate hours, different times to discuss.
Shouldn't the TLF be listening to the meeting?
An important issue that they felt was coming up, and that was regarding our town hall. And their recommendation was to go ahead and recommend, after looking at the all facility letters, looking at CDPH's recommendations, looking at the CDC website, that we go ahead and mask during our town halls. Our first town, so they spent man hours or woman hours, person hours. They spent 10 to 14 hours talking about this issue. And town hall happened on Tuesday. And unfortunately, at town hall, one of the sessions was exposed to COVID, and none of them were masked because the leadership team chose to hear what the clinicians said and chose to go against their recommendations of masking in town hall. What this did was it took all of these people the time and effort to go through their thought process, their critical decision making, and then give their recommendation and have a non-clinical team reject their recommendations and then put almost 200 people at risk. If you're only counting the people in the room, we're not counting Resort at Squaw Creek staff, the kitchen staff, their families, the family of all the people in the room. And it just is a really good example of why the physicians don't feel valued. They spent their time, their effort, and their energy to make that decision and that recommendation, and the executive team went against it. I'm very concerned with the executive team making clinical decisions when the medical staff has already given their recommendation and they chose to go against it. It's just another reason for burnout in our organization. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. We certainly have heard a lot, and we have some direction in which we want to go. And I heard the word hope in somebody's presentation, whether they said it or not. And I think with what's been placed on the table today by our physicians and what I've heard from administration, that we truly do have hope, and that if we can work together following some of the presentation that Dr. Gray gave us and some of the ideas that the rest of our administration and physicians have, that we can work on something to make the environment one in which you can find joy. And if you can't find joy, at least you won't find burnout. So I would like to go ahead and leave that topic to our administration to set up some kind of discussion table, some kind of committee meeting in which we can further discuss it, or do a presentation on how we will work on the not necessarily high priorities, but if those are those quick fixes, we can do those and then spend our time working towards those harder fixes. I forgot one thing is that Dr. Arth was here and he was unable to stay for whatever reason, but he left a written comment. So I'm going to have Martina read that to us.
Yeah, I actually received 2 comments in the chat box. I had one from Dr. Vayner, who said that he was in agreement with Dr. Ritchie's comment. And then Dr. Arth as well, he had a bad Zoom connection, but he sent me a message saying that his public comment would be that he supports any effort to help physician burnout. Mostly need to strengthen offices with phones to office, not the access center, allow flexible working agreements, etc. End of comment.
Okay. Thanks for that, Martina. So with that, I'm leaving it in the hands of our leadership and our physicians to work together to at least resolve those issues that are up front and in your face that can be addressed now, and then work on other issues. And I have to remind everybody there's always two sides to the story. So again, working together, I think we can solve some of the problems. All right, we have more to cover.
Alice, if I may ask one question. So what do we see the board's role in this being?
I think it's getting, okay, my recommendation is that we hear updates continually about what is happening. And if things aren't changing, that as a strategic board, we might make recommendations of other things that could be looked at.
Certainly there were recurring themes that we heard, throughout. And I would hope that we could continue to ride that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Director Barnett. I'd just like to make a comment about this. And I think, first of all, we have to reassure all the people that have come forward on this presentation tonight, that we are sincerely listening to them, and secondly, that they are safe in saying what they said, that there'll be no repercussions for their comments. I really feel we need to reassure them of that. And then I think as a board, we should kind of think of a task force idea of going forward here. And I think, at some point we should, as a board, talk about what that task force would look like and who would be on it. Those are my comments.
Thank you for that. I think the discussion of setting goals and what are those areas that we can work on first, developing some kind of a timeline of when we want to see those to happen. But again, I think we need to get everybody at the table to talk about that, whether it's Harry and Dr. Gray or, Dr. Lane, department heads, to look at what is it they want us to start with. But I agree with you, Dr. Barnett, that mostly what we are is we're here to listen and to know what's going on with the medical staff, and also that there is no retaliation. I think they get to a point where they don't care anymore. I'm going to say what I need to say. I'm going to say my truth. And we are here to hear that and not have any consequences that are negative to that. So thank you for bringing that up, Director Barnett. Director Shamlin.
Yes, I think one of the things we might consider too, if we're going to address these issues in any special ways, we've got to have some way to measure results. And I know we survey the employees every other year and the physicians every other year. I would hope we might think or ask the administration to at least consider, for the time being, surveying the physicians every year to see what kind of progress we're making, even on a short-term basis.
A survey or even a town hall with just physicians, where physicians can talk. I know that everybody's asking, what's the plan? What's the timeline? But, this is our first discussion as a board with all this information. So I don't think tonight's the night to give all that information out or to come up with that information. But I think we as a board really need to look at what are those outcomes that we want to see? When do we want to see them? Yeah. Where do we get the data? That kind of stuff that you've brought up, Dale.
Yeah, well, as I say, I'm responding to Mary and Bob's questions about what do we as a board see we need doing, and that's one of the things that occurs to me that we could do. So.
Well, Director Barnett, I think we may want to set up a special board meeting to just kind of discuss, what our role would be to address all of these concerns, think about them, try to figure out and work with the administration. I just think we need to think about these things and take to heart some of the suggestions and to spend some more time on it.
Yeah, that's what I'm going along with, is that we're getting all this information. How can we have a plan tonight or have outcomes or have a timeline when we haven't really sat down to digest all of it? I think it was great information that they gave us. And as far as a special meeting, that could happen, or we already have a special meeting coming up in September. But maybe as we continue to have these discussions, the board can have at its retreat the discussion of what is their role and how far do we extend our role to help with the resolution of some of these burnout issues.
Yeah, we also got to keep in mind, and I've had this drilled into my head 9 years on the board, is that the board has some specific responsibilities, and I don't think we want to do anything to undermine the admin. We want to encourage them, give them ideas, but the relative responsibilities we have to constantly keep in mind.
So again, doing it at the governance level, what are our policies and what are we following them?
Yeah.
Okay.
This might be a good subject for a retreat, and maybe add it on the agenda of the retreat that we have scheduled currently.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We have more to cover, ladies and gentlemen. So if we can go ahead and close, we have one more hand still up. Dr. Fountain.
Hi, Alice. Thank you very much for just a quick opportunity to show my support, first and foremost, to what Dr. Gray had to present. I think I can provide information based on bullet points here from my perspective. First and foremost, I think it's essential that physicians have the ability to provide a voice and direction, specifically in regards to clinical information. And I think that the board could use this as an example. When you sit down to make your decisions on your strategic plan or whatever you decide to do, I would highly support or highly recommend having physicians available to help guide you. To help give you a clinical foundation and expertise and knowledge on what it is that we are experiencing. I think if you move forward with only the current administrative staff, that you will not get the full picture and the full story, and therefore may fall short. I would express my concern if that was the movement forward, and I can't express enough how I think that our medical staff needs to have a voice and needs to have the ability to help direct the cure. And that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
No, thank you. Again, we're not there to solve the problem. We're there to make sure that there are processes in place and that you as a physician or you as a physician group have been heard and those issues that you have brought up are being addressed. So again, thank you for your input, and I am going to go ahead and move on to our next item. I did move item for board education, the No Surprise Act, and I'm hoping that Crystal Betts is still here.
Oh, I'm here. I don't know if you're prepared to go through the No Surprises Act. It's not exactly exciting material. So Alice, I will leave it up to you. The material will probably take some time to get through, and I know we're already pushing 20 after 8. So if you want to continue with this agenda item, fine. I'm more than willing to give you the education. If you're concerned about timing, we can always bring it back to next month or another future month. It's really the board's call. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, thank you for doing that. So can I ask the board for a raise of hands if you want to? It's not a critical issue that needs to be addressed today for any of our actions to be taken financially. But would you be willing to postpone it until our September meeting so that we can go back to some other issues?
This is Director Barnett. Yes, I think we can do that. I read through the act. One more administrative burden on the hospital. The poor docs and everybody are going to have to face, but yeah.
Okay, so I've seen shaking of heads from at least 3 of our board members, 4, 5. So we will postpone it, and I appreciate, Crystal, your ability to be flexible with us. Because again, you're not going very far. One of the things I think we have to do now is to do the financial report that was pulled by Director Shamlin.
Yeah.
So Director Shamlin?
Yes, thank you. We pulled this, and I say we, because Mary Brown and I are both on the Finance Committee, and we had our discussion. And we pulled this because we want to make sure that the full board understands the implications of the July financial report. It's been a long time, Crystal, as you well know, since we looked at a report where you didn't beat the budget, and it's considerably lower. I remember going through the previous software program, CPSI, when we were going through that, and everything was hitting into bad debts, and there was a lag in the recovery of that those funds. I know you indicated in your letter to us, and thank you again for that letter. I hope you all read that explanation she wrote. It was very comprehensive and understandable. That the one of the comments you made was $1 million due to the Noridian problem that will resolve in August and September. I'm going to assume that many of these other problems are going to resolve in the future months, and that by the time we get into October, that our year-to-date is going to look pretty good. Am I correct in that assumption?
The 3 specific issues that really, I'm going to say 4. So from a contractual allowance point of view, you are correct. Noridian, even though they acknowledged we were no longer going to be part of the PIP program, and what that program does is it provides hospitals payments every 2 weeks that they then, when you submit inpatient Medicare claims, they basically don't pay you for the claims because you're getting prepaid. And most small hospitals participate in PIP to help balance their cash flow, which is not something we no longer need to do. And being on the PIP program is a pain in the butt because it's a big reconciliation process that you go through at the end of the year. So we were removed from PIP last fiscal year 22, but for whatever reason, they did not put whatever they were supposed to put in their system to stop them from withholding our inpatient claims. So not only did we not get our PIP payments, but we also didn't get paid on our inpatient claims. And those adjustments, because PIP is all kind of rolled into contractual allowances, that $1 million hit contractual allowances. What Noridian told us to do is they can't fix it for us, that we in essence have to reverse every single one of those inpatient Medicare claims and rebill it. And when we rebill it, we will get paid on those inpatient claims. So as we work on that and get those claims out the door and they're adjudicated and paid, then that contractual allowance will adjust itself back where it needs to be. So that was one of the major issues. That's $1 million right there. The 2 other issues that we were addressing is the designation of the rural health clinic on the 2nd floor of the cancer center. They made that retroactive back to October of 21. And in order for us to bill those claims, we had to reverse all the claims, then hold the claims until the commercial insurance companies recognized our new MPI number that we bill under, and until we had our rates established with Medicare and Medi-Cal. So when we reversed all those claims going back to October, of course, the date of service or the date of discharge is what's going to be recognized in our system and is going to age it accordingly. And when you have accounts that are over 120 days old, you reserve for them more. That's just our process. So that made an increase to our accounts receivable in the aging category, causing more reserves. So as we push those claims out and they get paid, we will see that extra reserve disappear. Same with the anesthesia claims as we worked with Mercy to make sure the build was correct. We were holding those claims till we felt comfortable we could release them. And those claims were not released until the very last day of June. So we are waiting on the adjudication of those claims. And of course, we started billing for anesthesia way back in January. So again, more than 120 days old, sitting on the accounts receivable aging that we reserved. That should rectify itself once those claims get paid. So that was the biggest issue with the contractual allowances. And then the other issue was really benefits. And in the benefits section, it was more about budgeting based upon the information we had at the time we produced the budget about when physical therapy would come on board, trying to predict what type of personal leave balances they would bring with them, the value of those personal leave balances and the impact that would have on our liability. We underestimated that amount, so we took a $500,000 hit on additional liability and an expense. And then we had a lot of staff out on COVID during the month of July, which uses, for lack of a better word, COVID pay that we're required to provide to them. We don't accrue it. It gets expensed as used. That's not something we can predict in a budget. So that's an unbudgeted item. And in addition, we had the raises for the associations that hit on July 1. Our budget only estimated an 8% increase, but their raises were 8 to 10%. So that undervalued our projection on the paid leave balances, which caused another variance. So those are the issues that really affected July. I am hopeful the contractual allowances will rectify itself. It will probably not be in August. So I ask that you give a few months to allow all that to vet itself out. And the benefits could play out if we encourage staff to use their PL, not hold on to it. And so if they use it instead of accrue it, that will also help our liability and our expense. So that is the impact of what you're seeing in July.
Okay.
Okay, that answers your question.
Answers mine. Mary, do you or anybody else have any other?
No, I, as you, thought it was important for everyone to hear it a second time.
Yeah, okay.
If I may know, oh, sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just saying it's very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. One more thing I did want to note to you guys, there was an error on the cash investment page. I had the Chandler Investment Fund at a 0.18%. Yes. That is not right.
Yeah, and I thought, that's not right.
Yeah. It should have been 2.87%. So sorry about that error.
Yeah.
You're forgiven.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we need, is there any other discussion about the financial statement? Anything from our audience regarding the financial report? Okay, then we need a motion to accept the financial report for July 2022 as written.
I move approval, Dale.
Okay.
And I would second it, Mary.
Okay, so it's moved by Director Shamlin, seconded by Director Brown that we accept the financial report for July 2022. A roll call vote.
Director Barnett?
Approved.
Director Shamblin?
Yes.
Director McGeary?
Yes.
Director Brown?
Yes.
And Director Wong?
Yes. So the financial report has been approved. We'll go on to 18. Any board committee reports? No. Any board member reports? I'm not going to ask for closing comments because we're not closing yet. Okay, hearing none of those, then we'll move on to item 20, and that's going back to closed session and then we'll continue our items in that.
Okay.
We take a break.
Yeah, can we take a break?
We take a little break.
Can I just read us back into closed?
I'm sorry. Oh,
I wanted to read us back into closed and allow for comment. So it's we're going back into close on 5.7 public employee performance evaluation of the president CEO.
and does anybody have comments on the agenda item for closed session? Okay, then we will go into closed session and run to do whatever you need to do quickly.
5 minutes?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Thank you.
5 minutes.